Today's show is sponsored by the Pittsburgh Cultural Trust. They are bringing The Psychology of Serial Killers to the Byam Theater on May 2nd. If you are a fan of true crime, of mystery, it sounds like this is going to be right up your alley. The Psychology of Serial Killers is a live true crime event led by a clinical psychologist, Dr. Rachel Tolles. She's diving into the minds of some of the world's most infamous serial killers right there on stage with you. So get some answers and your tickets right now at trustarts.org. This is CityCast Pittsburgh. I'm Megan Harris, and here's what Pittsburgh's talking about. Pennsylvania's primary election is coming up. It is May 19th, but the deadline to register, if you have not yet, is May 4th. You have to do that if you have moved, if you've changed political parties, and frankly, even if you just want to be able to vote if you're independent, because that's not a thing you can do in the state of Pennsylvania without a party affiliation. Not my favorite thing about living here. And two of the candidates that you are going to see on a primary ballot and that you're going to hear a lot about in May and beyond are the people running for governor. So they are both in their primaries, technically unopposed, but we think it's worth tapping in now to hear what they're all about before we get to November. So in one corner, you've got incumbent governor, Democrat Josh Shapiro, and in the other, you've got state treasurer, Republican Stacey Garrity. Also, there is a possible dark horse option. We will get to that. I'm with Stephen Caruso, Capitol reporter for Spotlight PA. What do you think, Stephen? Does this feel like Battle Royale yet in Harrisburg, or does anyone even care?
Well, okay, people always care. This is politics, at least in Harrisburg. Their entire bit is caring about this thing more than anyone else in the world cares about it. And that makes sense.
And they're committed to that bit, yeah.
And it makes sense. Like, this is where their money comes from. This is where their power comes from. But, like, are voters thinking about it? I don't know. I think they're thinking about elections. But I would say, too, I think the gubernatorial election, I mean, in midterm years, whatever party has the presidency, the party that doesn't have the presidency tends to do really well. So far, most polling shows that. So, I mean, I already have had a few Republicans tell me that they don't feel that good about their odds this year. So, you know, if that's exciting, just depends on how much of a sicko you are.
Well, I mean, Josh Shapiro has been in state politics for a minute. Hit us with his highlight reel, at least as he might, put it forth.
So, I mean, the Josh Shapiro highlight reel is really, he put out a book this year, and he kind of lays it out right there. For him, it would be, he starts as, a do-gooder Capitol staffer who works his way up. He becomes a young state rep who flips a Republican district. He then jumps to county commission when he realizes he doesn't really like working in the state legislature. He doesn't like being there. As county commissioner, he manages to get the finances straight. He builds some good governance practices, right sizes the county, gets services working better. Then runs for attorney general of the state in 2016, serves 2 terms, electoral juggernaut, picks some big fights. He cuts a deal between UPMC and Highmark so that they accept each other, as and don't force people to find new doctors.
Yep. That was a big one here in Pittsburgh.
Exactly. Hey, look, I still got enough Pittsburgh in me. I've seen that big UPMC, sign staring out over like the Eye of Sauron. But then, goes after the Catholic Church, tries to ensure that, that there's accountability for the church covering up child sex abuse by priests. And then he runs for governor in 2022. And since then, he has been governor. And I think that's where, there's going to be a distinction between perhaps how the cynical press corps looks at him and how, they present themselves. And that's going to happen. The governor's point would be that he's presided over divided government. Wins have been hard to come by, but he's gotten some. There have been budget deals that put more money in education. He signed, a handful of bills that have, banned texting while driving in Pennsylvania, or at least tightened our laws, distracted driving writ large. Expanded a property tax rent rebate for seniors, who are on fixed incomes. Those budget deals have included free breakfast for kids in K-12 schools, done a bunch for economic development, quicker permitting, things that, I think make for compelling speech material. But then, I would say that some of the big structural issues I've covered in Pennsylvania government since 2018 have been unaddressed. Property taxes are still going up. The state's tax system is still kind of flat, and, we have a structural deficit. So the state is spending more money than it brings in consistently to try and pay for an aging population. And I'd say, on the child sex abuse issue within Catholic Church, the governor, put a lot of eggs in the basket of I'm going to advocate for them. I'm going to make sure a system doesn't fail them again. But they have yet to see redress in the General Assembly. It's very easy to then blame all of that on Senate Republicans. But, I would say, he is also campaigning as someone who gets stuff done. And there have been things he's gotten done, but there's also a lot of stuff that he hasn't gotten done.
Yeah, I feel like I hear people talking more about the things that he says he wants, less than I hear people talk about things that he has actually accomplished. He's talked a lot about wanting to raise the minimum wage and legalize recreational cannabis. These are great talking points, and I appreciate that my governor is saying out loud in mass, I want this, I want this, I want this, year on year on year. But it's not happening. So, yeah, it's the GSD of it all. He touts that, but I don't know how much getting done we're actually doing sometimes,
Yeah, I think that's a conversation I hear with people in Harrisburg. They don't often want to put their name to that, but that is a very common refrain. And I would say too, I don't know if it's necessary.
It is good marketing though. I get it.
I mean, it is great. I mean, you can use stuff when you fits the crowd. You can use shit when it fits the crowd.
I also think it kind of appeals to exactly what he's always going for, which is this I'm a hardcore Democrat, but Republicans, don't be afraid of me. And it kind of speaks to that, it captures something in the crassness and bluntness that I think a lot of conservatives really appreciated about Trump in the early going, that he just says the thing. And I think Shapiro has figured out a way to tap into that feeling, if not that what comes next.
Yeah, I mean, I think my colleague Mark Levy actually literally did a whole story on how the use of curse words is becoming more common in politics. This was a couple of years ago for the AP. It was a great story, and it kind of talked about some of that. It's just this attempt to, I think, politicians speak more colloquially, because we're in this era where, I think some of the grandeur around politicians has been stripped away by the Trump era, general anti-establishment feelings, folks feeling more connected because of social media. We have almost parasocial relationships with politicians in the same way maybe an influencer people would, or a television personality, a reality TV star.
And in Shapiro's case, he has gone out of his way, his digital team, to craft that. They intentionally sign up influencers. They work with them to craft messaging. If you think you're seeing the same Shapiro message from a variety of different voices in Pittsburgh, it's because you are. They're doing that on purpose. There is an actual group chat.
Well, and let's be clear too. That is not just Shapiro. I just think
it's well deployed here. That's all.
Oh, yeah. No, I know. And I think that I have always been struck by the fact that Shapiro and his team seem very adept at using the messaging implements of the 21st century and thinking forward with them. How do we deploy these to not just refight the last war, but fight the next war, so to speak? I think that's one thing you always have to give him, which is why he's such a crafty campaigner. He's a disciplined messenger. He's an amazing fundraiser. He's willing to show up in pretty much any space. He did a podcast with Ted Nugent. This is the person who I can think of as shooting a bow and arrow at a cutout of Hillary Clinton on stage or something. If I'm remembering my 2000s. Okay,
that I had no idea about.
If I'm remembering my 2010s media cycles well enough, or that, that is something I feel I remember. But
I will ding him heavily on that point though, because he doesn't really do sit downs with traditional media at all, and that's because we're the ones who will actually question him. Yes, he will do Joe Blow's podcast, I say from my closet podcast studio, but he won't talk to somebody who actually understands local politics in Philly or in Pittsburgh, and often I think in probably State College in Harrisburg. He avoids those conversations.
There has been some really compelling stories I've read. I remember reading the first one after the 2024 election, which obviously everyone kind of talked about as the Joe Rogan election, the podcast election. And I think fundamentally, it just comes back to the value proposition. The central trade-off used to be that we're going to ask you annoying questions in traditional press, where we use our reporting techniques and journalistic ethics to try and get to the core of the matter and ask hard accountability questions. And but you, as a politician, for sitting yourself through that, get exposure, get a vast amount of exposure to a vastly consumed mass media that everybody pulls from. But fundamentally, if you want to find a lot of eyeballs, people who maybe have checked out, who maybe have left mass media behind, you go talk to influencers. And guess what? You don't have to deal with the annoying freaking questions.
Yep. Yep. You can just set up a really cute backdrop and take a picture with them. And sometimes that is genuinely enough because it's not the same business. It's like fundamentally different. Before we move on from Shapiro, I guess as you look at the things he's saying, because I mean, I know you can't fully predict the future,
oh, I can't?
Stephen,
No.
But what what would you say you expect from a second term should he be successful?
It's all going to hinge upon what happens with the General Assembly. I wrote a story to this effect for Spotlight that, like, again, with the big caveat that historical trends, particularly in the Trump era, have been smashed to pieces. And he is a person who has shown himself to be somewhat immune to the forces of gravity laws of gravity we all have assumed. Laws of physics we've all assumed. Shapiro looks like he's probably going to win. I think so much of it's going to come down to, if he wins, does he have a Democratic trifecta? Do Democrats control the state House, as they have, and then the state Senate? He's been working with a split General Assembly, one of a handful of governors that to do that. And that is a hard situation. And there's a lot of politics to go into that. I think, you have a handful of Republican state senators who kind of openly will, like, note that, like, when they're voting on things that, like, I'm worried that, like, I'm just, like, setting up talking points for the governor when he runs for president in a couple of years.
Yeah. Because that's going to happen. Like, that's the undercurrent of all of this. Like, when he talks about, I can GSD and I can work across parties, it's because he wants to run for Pennsylvania Avenue.
Yeah. So, and that has been a point Stacey Garrity has made repeatedly. So all of this say, like, I'm not trying to say there isn't politics going on in Harrisburg. Of course there is. But still, regardless of the motives, like, Harrisburg hasn't been very productive. Historically unproductive sessions. Governor Josh Shapiro has signed historic low number of laws. And so the question becomes, like, can that dynamic change? Starting in 2027, if there is a flip of the state Senate. It has not been in Democratic hands for about 3 decades. And if that was a 1-year blip, you got to go back to basically since 1980, there has been just almost entirely Republican dominance of the state Senate. And if that changes, it's not that there still won't be complicated Harrisburg dynamics. It's not that those chambers probably won't have their own agendas, their own will, but it'll make things easier because you're not trying to negotiate across parties where, there's just different ideological chasms. There's different, incentives in terms of, like, who wants to have power. Like, you're just having negotiation among Democrats, and maybe you need to bring a few Republicans along every once in a while, but that's a far different negotiation. So, that probably opens the door to everything that we were talking about that Shapiro has talked about getting done that hasn't gotten done. Minimum wage, statute of limitations, maybe stricter gun laws, maybe more abortion, opening up states' abortion laws, or just at least affirming more of those freedoms in the law. We could go down the list of all of the things that you could get done. Just think about the Democratic Party platform. That is all on the table in Harrisburg if the upper chamber flips.
Well, one more crystal ball moment. Can it? Will it? Is that possible? How possible is it?
I made a comment somewhere in 2022 when the state house looked on the table that, like, there is a path, but you need everything to go right. So I think I said it's like when there's a single path to a destination and requires you walking over a rickety bridge over the cauldron of a volcano, filled with bubbly lava. Like, yeah, you could do it. It just might be really hard, and better hope you don't slip. And that's kind of how I feel about the state Senate at this point.
Love a volcano reference as we're talking about state politics. Perfect.
Got to keep the people interested, razzle dazzle.
Today's podcast is sponsored by the Pittsburgh Opera. A lot of us think of opera as really dramatic stories focused on tragic love, and they can totally be like that. But opera can also be ridiculous and fun, and that is exactly what to expect from their next show. The Pittsburgh Opera is presenting Verdi's Falstaff. If you have not seen it, Falstaff is considered one of the best-known comedic operas of all time. The music really matches the mischief. It's based on The Merry Wives of Windsor by William Shakespeare, and you're going to follow Sir John Falstaff's attempts to woo 3 women with identical love letters. Honestly, I think Falstaff would have loved online dating. The show runs April 28th to May 3rd, and each performance has English subtitles projected above the stage. So you're always going to know what's going on, though I have been to their shows like this. The performers do such a great job of depicting the action. If you look away, you're still going to know what's up. You have 3 chances to catch the show April 28th, May 1st, and May 3rd. And a big bonus for that May 3rd matinee, the Pittsburgh Opera is providing free childcare. Such a game changer. Tickets to Fall Staff start at just $20 with all kinds of discounts for kids, teens, students, seniors, military service members, and more. You can learn more at pittsburghopera.org/citycast. Pittsburgh Opera, where can we take you?
Today's show is brought to you by City Theater and their production of Hedwig and the Angry Inch. This Tony Award-winning musical follows the life, loves, and heartbreaks of the legendary Hedwig, an East German rock and roll goddess. I have been meaning to see this musical forever. I know it's got a huge cult following, but the last time City Theater put on the show was in 2003. So I am very thrilled they're reviving it. It's exciting for people like me who get to check it out for the very first time, and all the so-called heads out there who will now get a chance to re-experience the show right here in Pittsburgh. Hedwig and the Angry Inch is running from May 12th to June 7th at the Greer Cabaret downtown, and it's being presented in partnership with the Pittsburgh Cultural Trust. You do not want to miss this beloved, fierce, and energetic show. Tickets available at citytheatercompany.org.
Okay, let's talk about the challenger. What is Stacey Garrity saying she would do as governor? What are some of her top issues and her highlight reel? Like, she's been state treasurer now for a few years.
Yeah, so Stacey Garrity is a businesswoman from northeastern Pennsylvania, Bradford County, Susquehanna County. Sorry, there's a Bradford, PA, which is not in Bradford County, Pennsylvania.
Yep, that's us.
But yeah, she is from northeastern Pennsylvania, businesswoman, works at a metal firm that works with tungsten powdered metals. Those end up being used in weapons. Like they build munitions, hard substance, good for shooting at people. She's been there for a while. She's made a few moves to run for office. She attempted to be the GOP nominee for Congress for a special election in, I believe it was 2019, maybe it was 2018. So she's kind of floated around. And then 2020, she ran for state treasurer. She was unopposed in that primary, won in an upset, knocked off the incumbent Democrat, Joe Torsella, in a shock to a lot of people. In an election, I think also defied a lot of norms and how people thought things were going to go. Because Trump won, but then Republicans did great down ballot. So since then, treasurer is a sleepy position. It's an important position. Don't get me wrong. It just doesn't get a lot of coverage. Like, their job is to oversee the state's literally hundreds of billions of dollars in money that kind of floats in a few accounts and this is to say, it's not like that all that could just go spent willy-nilly. Like, a lot of it's in restricted accounts that's set aside for specific projects. It's money that doesn't have to be spent quite yet. Like, think about it as like, the state's got to pay 90,000 people or so every single month. Like, you need a lot of money in the bank just to make sure that when, everyone goes to cash their paycheck, that can go out. But all of this to say, the treasurer's job is to make sure that money is well taken care of. She has some discretion to invest some of it in certain things. They also she also sits on the pension boards. She also gets to hand out unclaimed property. These are all very small things, but I think important. Manages state savings accounts for people with disabilities, whole bunch of small items that fit into that role. It doesn't often get politicized, but, we're kind of seeing like where it can right now because she's refusing to pay the governor's bills for some security upgrades to his personal home after the arson last year. Yeah. Anyway, all of this is to say, so she's been in that office, and she is now after Shapiro won in 2022, which was a blowout. He won by double digits against Doug Mastriano. I think Republicans were like, we need a candidate who will have an honest showing against Shapiro, because Republicans blamed that blowout for the state house flipping in 2022, because Republicans in control of the legislature. Garrity was that consensus candidate for a lot of establishment folks. She barnstormed the heck out of the state. Everyone says she's a hard worker. She built a lot of connections, both at the top rung of the party and the bottom rung of the party. And so, she kind of became that candidate. She didn't face any announced opposition, really, for the nod. She got the party endorsement. She's the only person on the ballot. As a governor, she said she wants to focus a lot on more natural gas development. I mean, she's from a gas-producing area. She wants education. She wants alternatives to public schools, school vouchers, more private schooling, state funding for that. We're talking, lower taxes, less spending, sort of I would say a very standard Republican platform. And, the main thing is like seeing how that will play with an electorate that has now voted for Democrats for governor for 3 straight terms, which is somewhat unheard of in our state.
Yeah, we've always balanced a lot more. Yeah.
Yeah. So she's presenting herself as a change candidate. I think the main thing is like, will people want that, especially when, there is so much frustration, I think, with the Trump administration. Their approval is down. She is a Republican. She has Trump's endorsement. It's like she's campaigned to be a change in Pennsylvania, but the local and state politics increasingly are all in the same axis as the national politics. Like, there's still separation here. People still think about their local issues, I think, in their own bucket. But when it comes to party identification, it's just everyone is very polarized along the lines of their party. And I think that could really carry the day. But again, look, every election is its own. Candidate quality matters, and we shall see how things go.
CityCast Pittsburgh is sponsored today by Window Nation. If you're a regular CityCast Pittsburgh listener, then you know we have been absolutely delighted by Pittsburgh spring. It is so nice to see the trees turn green, get that afternoon breeze. It's been such a long winter. But to really make the most of the season, you probably want some nice windows. Maybe yours get stuck. Maybe they are starting to leak. Maybe you just want a refresh. Window Nation's running their The More You Buy, The More You Save sale, which could save you up to 50% off all the windows for your home, along with 0% financing for 5 years. When you buy with Window Nation, you get to pick from over 1,500 styles and colors. Dang. And they're all custom built. They come out to measure your windows so they fit right the first time, and the installation crews are truly professionals. The crew leaders have over a decade of experience, and the installation all happens in one day. And if anything does end up going wrong, you are protected with a lifetime warranty. So hurry, the sale ends soon. Schedule a fast, free consultation now at windownation.com.
Let's talk about the money. Who has more money? I'm guessing it's Josh. Where's it coming from? Like, what's the vibe headed into both the primary and November?
Josh Shapiro is a fundraising juggernaut. It is one of his calling cards as an elected official, as a politician, that he has been incredible at raising money. He's raised about $36 million since the beginning of 2025. That was a record-setting 2025 for him. That also includes a couple months of 2026. Sources told me that he told donors right before he launched that he's trying to raise about $100 million, which would easily set the record, smash the record he set in 2022. The sources are kind of everyone you'd imagine and more. So we're talking, obviously, unions, particularly trade unions, but also the teachers union, also SEIU, public sector workers writ large. But then we're also talking about, Mike Bloomberg. We're talking about Hollywood executives. We're talking about tech barons like Reid Hoffman, who is in the Epstein files. I know there's a couple people in the Epstein files on there, but that's a separate conversation. I've found defense contractors, sports owners, the guy who makes Kind bars, a lot of venture capitalists, JD Pritzker, it is a murderer's row of billionaires, industrialists, and the sort of folk and people with interest, I should say, in front of state government. Coal power plant operators, people who run, naval workshops in Philadelphia who have gotten state investments to expand their works. Real estate developers, I could keep going. And I almost just these are voluminous reports with, tens of millions of dollars in donations. And, the Shapiro's camp would say this is because the governor practices a broad base of politics. He wants to build a big tent. A lot of people like what he's doing. But I also do have to say, I have covered Harrisburg. I did a whole story last year that there is this, the culture of Harrisburg is that a way to get access to politicians potentially is first thing you do is you might want to go to one of their fundraisers. It doesn't mean you're going to get a result. Doesn't even mean you're going to get a conversation. There's a lot of people who also, if you tried to walk up to a staffer for a politician and say, hey, I gave money outside the building. Can I talk to him? They'll shut you out. This is a real push and pull within the culture of Harrisburg, but I do think it's just very fair to say that the environment of Harrisburg puts a lot of emphasis on both the politics and the policy, the governor's camp has usually pushed back on this as a slanted narrative, but I'm gonna stand by my reporting and send people to Access Harrisburg by Spotlight PA.
Yeah. What about Stacey? What Garrity? What's her war chest look like right now?
It is not a lot. She only raised about $2.5 million. Compare that to the 36 million since in the same time period. She has gotten a lot of money from small donors. Shapiro has too. It's just more as a proportion of that 2.5 million. Garrity has gotten more of it from small donors, but like Shapiro has more donors writ large, more small donors. I will say a lot of Shapiro's money is also from out of state. Garrity, almost all of it's from in state. But you also,
and correct me if I'm wrong. Like as we're talking about this, we're talking about the money that officially gets donated to them. We're not talking about like the external like groups or whatever that are absolutely aligned with a candidate, but like can collect money in a different way.
Yeah, do you mean like dark money?
Yeah, I mean that's kind of how this started.
Yeah, no. So we are talking about
this is the on the books money.
This is the. I mean, it's all on the books somewhere. It doesn't matter if we can see the books. That's the main thing. And this is all the money that is on campaign finance reports that these candidates file regularly, are required to. These are all donations made directly to the campaign. Pennsylvania law places no limits on how much money. If I happen to have $1 billion and I want to give 999,900, go down the list, check to a candidate, I could do that. It'd be perfectly legal. And so every single report that you see, like these are donations coming directly from individuals or PACs set up by a business or, by just other people then who are taking money from other individuals. So yeah, Garrity, a lot of it's more been like her biggest donation is $250,000.
Which is a lot of money, but it's just not a lot compared to the other guy.
So like from the period of January to March 30th, the first period, Garrity raised $1 million. A little over. Shapiro matched that with a single check from a man named Christopher Larson, who is a crypto billionaire in California.
Is Garrity getting any Trump money? Because like if you're going to be aligned with somebody who like touts themselves as being famously wealthy, I can see expecting a check in the mail as well.
I haven't seen any yet, though I will also say, too, she had that Mar-a-Lago fundraiser. That happened on the last day of the reporting period. So there's the money from that will probably appear in her next campaign finance report.
Gotcha.
I'm definitely waiting to see that. Apparently it was a sold out fundraiser, so that could be a big boost. I believe the Garrity campaign told Penn Live that should be a 6-digit haul from that one event, which would, be a very sizable amount for her. I'll also just say, if I can be a campaign finance nerd for a second, because everyone has weird obsessions.
This is a safe space, Stephen.
Thank you. Trump has raised a ton of money in a super PAC. So which FEC rules like that is publicly reported that money goes into a super PAC. We just don't always, it's always hard sometimes to trace the source because like a nonprofit could give to a super PAC and this nonprofit might not report donors. Why am I saying all this? It could very well be that Trump's contributions to Garrity are going to come further down the line in the general election, or like it could be that like it comes from a super PAC and it's like in a harder to trace way. Like it won't be showing up right on her campaign finance report. It'll be showing up as outside independent spending that is not coordinated with the campaign. So like that might just be something that a dynamic we don't see for a little bit longer. But that doesn't mean it can't happen. We are sadly just moving forward into a future that we cannot predict.
Sadly, he says. And on the Republican side, Garrity is technically running unopposed, but a Pennsylvania senator that I think a lot of us know the name, Doug Mastriano, has some supporters who say that they are working on a write-in campaign for him. Any idea whether that'll get traction? He's run for governor before.
Yes, quite successfully. Smashed a field of about 8 establishment candidates while being underfunded compared to the rest of them. Look, here's the thing. I think that I go back to the Republican establishment did not want Mastriano on the ballot.
He's much more far-right MAGA Trump supporter. Like Garrity flirts with it and it seems comfortable being in Trump's orbit, but like not the way Mastriano like went, at least I'm thinking of 2 to 4 years ago.
This is the other thing, like both parties, I feel like are having a little bit of identity crises about where do they stand, because Trump has been this polarizing figure who's shaped American politics to his will. Like him or hate him, that's just kind of been a fact. And so I think, I don't know, putting Mastriano and Garrity into like how they fit with Trump. I mean, Garrity has Trump's endorsement, and Trump also endorsed Mastriano in 2022. So I think like with Mastriano, it's he rose out of COVID. He rose out of response to people who were upset about the pandemic and the response. And he built a very strong grassroots movement there of people who are loyal to him, who think that he's really like a tribune of the people. That's a hard movement that I think put back in the box, so to speak. He said he wasn't running, but the write-in effort seems entirely grassroots. I think I've seen some reporting that has like Mastriano's blessing, so to speak, but he's not like actively campaigning for it. I also am not really clear who's funding it. I did reach out and they basically said, well, like it's a website and then it's word of mouth, so there's no cost to us. I don't know who would fund something otherwise, and that would be an interesting thing for me to keep. I want to keep an eye on. But all of this is to say that like I would just say that like whether you call it Trumpy, call it MAGA, call it whatever, like there is just a significant amount of grassroots folks in the Republican Party or in conservative circles who maybe don't even like the Republican Party all that much, but are definitely right of center, probably more to the far right, who look at Mastriano as like, their guy, maybe even their hero. And, he and the writing campaign, I think, is their effort to just show their displeasure with the Republican establishment in the state.
Is it displeasure with the Republican establishment, or is it, for some, sexism because they don't want to elevate a woman to a platform like this?
I have not done enough reporting to be able to make a hard claim either way. But, I think I would be foolish to not note that sexism is a real dynamic that's going to plague all politics, particularly American politics. I mean, has for a long time, and at this point doesn't seem like it's ebbing anytime soon.
Yeah. Before we close out, again, if you have not registered to vote, please do so. If you can only vote in Pennsylvania primary elections if you are a registered Republican or Democrat. Would love it if that could change. But that's the way things stand right now. Your deadline, again, May 4th. It's very easy. We'll put a link in our show notes where you can check your registration in your polling place, but also sign up if you haven't. But the primary coming May 19th. Are there any issues at this point that it seems like maybe Garrity and Shapiro and or Mastriano agree on?
Well, I guess I can't speak for Mastriano. They both kind of agree on data centers. Both are, I would say, softly supportive. I mean, Shapiro put a lot
Shapiro said he was very supportive and has walked that back quite a bit.
Yeah, so, and that's the thing. So Shapiro, was definitely supportive of the development. In his most recent budget address has now started to walk that back, want to place more restrictions on them. Garrity also, when asked about data centers at a press luncheon in, I believe, January, said, she's all for data centers as a way to expand the economy. So I'd say that's a big issue. Otherwise, I can get into some more wonky stuff where, the one is a False Claims Act, which is a thing that allows for people to sue companies and if they're committing fraud and try a fraud with federal money and get it back from them. That's a small thing. It's interesting. It's wonky. Spotlight PA covered it. Charlotte Keefe wrote a story about it. It goes back to the Civil War. But those are the two off the top of my head.
Okay. I'll be doing my homework on that one. I am also interested, but I am also a nerd like you. Stephen Caruso with Spotlight PA. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
That is all for today here on CityCast Pittsburgh. You can support the show by becoming a CityCast Pittsburgh neighbor. You get ad-free listening, some perks, some swag. You can find all the details at membership.citycast.fm. We'll be back tomorrow with more from around the city. We'll talk to you soon.
Megan, if you could figure out the issue that makes Pennsylvania voters consistently turn out, like you could be making hundreds of thousands of dollars as a consultant.